So, hi everyone. I'm here with Fred Stacey today, who's the CEO of Cloud Tech Gurus. So, you're based in the US and really involved around like technology implementations, really across call centers, but including collections, but across call centers in the US, North America, but also anywhere around the world as well. So, Fred, thanks very much for joining me.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
So it's great to have you on. And I think my first question I wanted to for the conversation was to start to chat a little bit about what are you seeing from a technology point of view in terms of implementation, and particularly from a North American point of view. I spend a lot of time talking about with the European perspective, but it'd be good to hear about what you're seeing, particularly in the US.
Yeah, let's start at the baseline, right? We are solely focused on contact center related technologies and services. What I'm seeing primarily, CCaaS is still driving
Mm,
a lot of the core change, right? We all know, I think over the last couple of years, we went from 60% to a little over 40% of the Fortune 500 still
mm,
running premise. So there's a long ways to go. The migration to cloud, those of us that operate a lot around technology, we tend to forget that not everybody has converted yet. Digital transformation is not complete. And as a whole, the industry still has a very big upside on the CCaaS side. But once you step outside of that core CRM, CCaaS, heading towards a digital transformation, artificial intelligence is the driving mechanism. And it's not just,
mm.
it's the individual point solutions that are really accelerating here in the
Mm.
States and in North America in general.
And what are you seeing in terms of particularly post-pandemic? We had to spend there's a huge amount of effort there to get people out of call centers, maybe doing like remote working, those kind of things. And the technology, it feels like that kind of accelerated a lot of technology kind of adoption, really. And did you see that continuing? Are people now going back in, or they going back to the way they were, or do you think that's fundamentally changed, but there's still a long way to go?
I've seen companies try to
Mm,
move back into the brick and mortar type models, but I would say the market has recognized that you can not only do the job as well, but you can find ways to improve. And the agent experience, a lot of agents, you let them go home. It's the Pandora's box was opened and they
mm,
love working from home. And I think that's going to continue to be a future. I see the hybrid model working best,
mm,
the spoke and wheel, or hub and spoke, sorry, where you've got a central location where people can come in for training, a little bit of cultural indoctrination, so to say, some exposure to the leadership in person, and then back to home
mm.
working normal. Yeah, that the technology accelerated through COVID throughout the last couple of years in technology that helps the work at home environment. But I think a lot of people also made a lot of decisions because they were forced to quickly.
Mm, mm.
And now we're seeing the transition from cloud to cloud also happening. So it's interesting that you want to talk about a forced disaster recovery test, learn the hard way very quickly.
There's been a lot of discussion here around cyber resiliency. I've been talking a bit about that recently, and yeah, exactly as you said, a lot of decisions made very quickly, and it was the need at the time. But it's almost like people almost like have to go back and now relook at it to say, well, how should it work? Now it's more stable, and making sure you've got things like, say, cyber resiliency is one of the angles that people are looking at. So to make sure it works longer term, agent monitoring, agent quality programs, all of those kind of things, and you might need tech or development to really make sure it's working as it should be.
Yeah, you absolutely need tech. The years of just getting by with duct taped and bubblegum systems together, it's gone by the wayside. In order to really truly run, and we all do this, PCI over here in the States, right? HIPAA,
Mm,
to run any kind of decent certifications or security requirements requires technology. Yeah, and that's just in general. It's not just contact centers, right? The whole world has shifted. You now see manufacturers having teams of software developers.
mm.
I think the modern world is forcing us all to become a little bit of a software technology type company, no matter what you do. And the contact center is definitely falls within that.
Yeah, I've been quite surprised how it's changed over my experience in terms of like going from being able to do things, you do things on spreadsheets, but now it's almost like a core requirement is understanding things like SAS, SQL. Those things are actually almost like in people's job descriptions. And you can see it as the demographics change, as people grow up with these things and they get to use it. And it's much more hands-on with coding than it ever has been, which leads some of us older folks who can only do HTML or some of those kind of things. We're like in catch-up mode to a certain extent, but it's changing. It really like it's changing, much more data savvy than it's ever been, I would think.
Yeah, we all have to change, right? And the only thing that's constant is change. But the growth in, I mean, I look at my kids; they're in their 20s, right? And they grew up. They did have early years without any technology in their hand, but
Mm,
then from early preteens, they have touched nothing but technology, and they've grown up around this. The speed at which they use it, the comfort, the
mm,
naturalness of it being a part of their day, it's just only going to continue to lead. And I think what's interesting is we're actually seeing artificial intelligence and really start to change it from pure writing code and understanding that piece to starting to go towards more of a natural language. So I think I actually more of an optimist. Of course, I'm a techno optimist. I see people like you and I being much more capable in the future of doing that stuff and less requirements of actually knowing how to write code, which is great. 28 years in contact centers, 20 years in software. I still can't write a line of code.
yeah.
So that makes me happy that there are tools coming down the pipe where I can just talk to it. And
And
some
And do you see that in some of the software products that you do look at? I suppose you're talking about, large language models, and it allows you to almost write code without writing code. Essentially, is one of the things it does. But also this whole idea around like self-serve. So I want to be able to self-configure. I want to be able to self-serve. I don't need to go to IT to be able to do that. I'm the call center manager, and I want someone in my team to be able to do that. Change routing, change whatever it is. That is that a theme that's coming through strongly?
I think everybody's been working on the UI UX and the user friendliness inside
Mm,
contact centers, right? Because we always wanted to remove IT. Back in the day, green screens and AS400s, even into the 4U Windows servers, it required a lot of heavy lift on IT. The thing is, we also created career paths for a
mm,
lot of people in the contact center, right? To
mm,
own and turn the dials and manage the servers. And now that's all shifting. I definitely do see an acceleration of a simplification of the platforms. Your average CCAS has something like 8 to 10,000 features, right? Different ways you can tune and turn the dials. Whereas a lot of the modern stuff is going to much more simplistic. The thing that excites me about the simplicity is the agent side, right? It shouldn't take you but 30 minutes to train up an agent and get them
mm.
comfortable on the platform because it should be that intuitive. And I think that started more with Apple and kind of the idea that a person should be able to just pick it up and intuitively use it. And I think a
Yeah.
lot of companies, the modern companies, are trying to build like that. That's definitely an advantage. But at the same time, you also hear from the administrators of the platforms in the background, they still want to turn dials. They
Yeah.
still have a job to do. And I think there's a little bit of that transition from, hey, I don't have to necessarily reboot the servers every night or know they turn the dials anymore. But some companies are pretty smart. The software vendors are recognizing that you still got to give tools so you can train and tune and do the things necessary. So I don't think the admins are completely out of a job yet.
Yeah, there's a bit of a balance there. I know you talk a bit about the Appleification, if that's even a word
It
of
is
software,
now.
right? Yes, and it's true, right? So you want to do something on your iPhone. I got my iPhone here, and work out how to do it. 3 or 4 clicks, and you work out how to do it, and you try a few different things, and just imagine how much that takes in terms of like training time out from the call center.
Yeah.
However, I suppose the other balance of it, where I've seen it, is you want to be able to do it in 3 or 4 clicks, but there might be an even easier way of doing it if you go behind the scenes to be able to do it if you're like an expert user. And I suppose and being able to do that, so like drop downs. And I used to like green screen, because you go into these sort of click drop downs. And if you're an expert user, you can go in and just do it with a couple of codes, right? But it takes you years of knowledge to be able to do that, right?
Yeah, those days I'm rather thankful that we're not doing screen scrapes and pulling data. The world of
4 letter
APIs,
codes.
yeah, yeah, don't get me wrong. I miss the days where I knew a lot more than most everybody else because it always makes you feel good. But nonetheless, the technology is moving in the right direction, and I, I think we're going into this phase now where, and I've seen this kind of cyclical process in buying where I feel like point solutions are really starting to lead the charge as far as
Mm,
what's forcing overall change in contact centers. And that excites me. The fact that we still haven't cracked the large percentage of premise space still amazes me. And
mm,
it excites me that all of this new technology is forcing because you can't connect in the same ways through APIs with the old antiquated premise. So there's a lot of things going on that's pretty exciting in our space.
Yeah, one of the things I hear when I talk to people in the US or in North America, there's a lot of emphasis on call centers and like the agent interaction with the customer and those kind of things. And I think over here it's changed a little bit, where there's probably like a certainly over the pandemic, there's been quite a lot of emphasis on digital servicing, taking out things like branches in the banking world, taking out call centers are much smaller than they used to be. How do you see that balance? And I'm interested in why there's a difference culturally between this almost like the two geographies to a certain extent. And is that going to start to change over in terms of more digital being adopted, changing sort of customer journeys to be more digital? And what's the impact, do you think, on call centers really?
Yeah, there's a whole lot wrapped up into that, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's start why the cultures are different. It'd take too long for us to talk, but I can definitely talk to what I feel like I see for the future, what I've seen in the transition from going from voice to channels. We've seen this transition for a long time. You've been in the game for a while. I remember when social media came out, everybody was, oh, social media is going to take
Mm,
over the contact center. Now you've got tiny little teams that manage social media communications, and a lot of it is bot related. I think the bigger conversation right now that I'm interested in is how much is the LLMs, LAMs, and the new models of artificial intelligence going to impact the overall contact center market. If you remember when Twilio came out and when Amazon Connect came out, the people that really adopted the CPaaS model were the software companies, right? Because
mm,
they had the chops to develop it. I think that's where we're at right now with a lot of the really advanced artificial intelligence bot technology is that the software companies are adopting those, and companies
mm.
like Klarna, they're going to kill it, and they're going to reduce probably somewhere what's looking like anywhere from 60 to 70% of their workforce, which is a huge number. If you scale that across all of the contact centers in the world, that's exceptional. That is really impactful to our industry. Now, just like CPaaS, there's only a percentage that have implemented it, right?
Mm,
Even today, if you look at Twilio and Connect as it exists as a CPaaS or any of the other CPaaS players, the only ones who can really deploy it and successfully maintain it are software companies that have developers, engineers. They understand
mm,
how to roll out and how to support software. The interesting dynamic is the point solutions that are actually developing these products that are legitimately capable of being managed by a small team of administrators and people who understand data and understand
mm,
how to write some of the prompts and stuff like that. The future that I see, and yeah, that's again, I'm a techno optimist. So from a customer experience, contact center, business, I think we're going to see a big impact on the number of agents. But at the same time, voice isn't going away. And
mm.
this isn't an easy solve for just anybody to do yet. So it'll take a lot of time. Heck, like I said, I think we're down to 40% of the Fortune 500 still are premise. Until people fully transform, it's still going to be a challenge and there's still going to be a lot of work to do.
So,
That's my opinion.
in terms of, I suppose, adoption of LLMs and the AIs that's coming across, I mean, do you see that? What's the characteristics of how you're seeing that? Is that complete replacement, or is it more around looking at like sub processes or like staff or employee augmentation? So you can either say, I'm going to completely replace these roles, I'm going to take 20% of the staff out, versus we're going to basically augment your job so you can do more with the same people.
Yeah. So it has to start out on augmentation, right? And we've been, you probably saw it over there just as much as we did. Most companies, as they started to market artificial intelligence, they learned from the IVR marketing and all the early stage attempts at AI. And none of the buyers want to hear, hey, you're going to have to let go of your people. You're
Mm,
no longer going to manage the same number of people. These are big, impactful things. A lot of the buyers, other than the CFO, of course, but a lot of the buyers are like, this is going to impact my audience. Vendors were pretty smart and they came out with the idea of agent assist, agent guidance, being able to help and create the super agent, right? But I'm a capitalist too, but I
mm,
recognize that those kind of numbers, even if you just say 50% of your traffic is managed through AI, no CFO in the world is going to say no to that.
mm,
Yeah,
mm,
so I'm a realist too. I think the agent assist technology, the combination of LLMs with the right guardrails, which is the mistake that a lot of the early stage bot companies made because they didn't have the guardrails in place. But with the right guardrails, they'll come out and they'll scan the knowledge base. They'll provide the tools back to the agent side, and they'll make agents more efficient, which will show you a pretty significant increase in performance and reduction in handle times and probably even staff. The big lift is the stuff like what we talked about with Klarna, where you're actually able to legitimately handle customer issues with a platform, even over voice, not just data. But voice isn't going away. We've seen it uptick the last couple of years. So it's not like customers are going this big migration to digital that everybody was threatening about 5 years ago. It just hasn't happened. People still want to call companies.
Yeah, I mean, and what about voice AI? So I know we've been nibbling around the edges in terms of like case studies that I've seen. So things like summarization, quality monitoring, those kind of things. But it's not that far away. I've got the app on my phone where you can have a two-way conversation, a voice conversation in two ways. How far away do you think we are from that? And I suppose what are some of the guardrails we've got to be really careful of, particularly in financial services? I would flag.
Oh yeah, so how far are we away? Let me throw on my or grab my crystal ball. I would guess realistically, well, we're already seeing one off, right? There are advanced companies already bringing voice solutions to the market, but it's going to take time. Realistically, I'd say 5 years to see hitting that 20 post early adoption, that 25-30% where you start to hit a standard. I think that's probably realistically within the next 5 years.
Mm.
Yeah, and you'll still require humans. Look, just like any of the other technologies, contact centers aren't going away. Customer experience is still a critical differentiator for businesses. So we'll always need the tier 2, tier 3, and the empathy and all the things that make human to human interactions so much better. But yeah, I'd say 5 years.
So we're arguing that AHT will probably go up, albeit on a lower volume, because you're going to have augmented people in terms of understanding what the process is, but they're having more in-depth conversations and maybe an also like empathetic kind of conversation. So you might have a longer AHT, which is certainly what we saw here around dealing with financial difficulties, but the volume that goes through is actually a lot smaller. So overall, it's probably less cost, but just the mix has changed because you've taken some of the easy stuff out.
Yeah, and I had an interesting debate last week. I was at a conference here in the States, and I had an interesting debate with another techno optimist on whether it was going to be the tier 1 people that were going to be augmented by AI. So the agents would be a lower cost agent, but augmented through AI, voice applications, and knowledge base integrations for agent assist and stuff like that. Or was it going to be all that stuff is going to be handled by the AI side, and it was just going to be that tier 3 that was really left to help with the really hard cases, like you said, long AHT time, a lot of challenge conversations with depth. And I think it's an interesting conversation is how will the companies deploy this technology in the future? And I don't think any of us have any good answers, but I think it's the secondary one, which is I think artificial intelligence will be able to manage most problems, but the ones that require human empathy, the bills are wrong in fintech, especially my bank, my account, credit card charges that show up, those are going to require human. So that's my opinion.
Yeah. I suppose you could look at it into, are we going to change the way we think about transactions or contact center transactions from being much more transactional, I'm calling to get something done, versus it's being more of an experience, right? And it's more of a relationship. And so if you go into a shop, as an example, it's actually, yes, I want to buy something and maybe I want to get it as cheap and as fast as I possibly can. But actually, when I go into my local shop, I want to have that conversation with the people and they recognize you and there becomes that relationship, which is quite hard to quantify versus just doing it faster, quicker, and cheaper to a certain extent.
Yeah, not a lot of people talk to me about this, but I'm actually more fascinated on what they're doing on the individual AI agent side, right? Meaning agent as in technology agent, right? The bot to bot communications that are going to take place in the future, the way we interact, and likely it'll be through our phone, right? Or some device, some of our personal device. We'll be communicating with our own bot who will have access to all of our who do we pay, what services do we use, and then how does that bot communicate back with the company's bot to dispute a charge, and maybe it automatically, the potential for this is
bots on bots.
Oh, yeah, exactly. And then at that point, we're as human in the loop, we're hardly even in. And That's people say, oh, that's 10, 20 years out. I don't think so.
Mm,
I just don't think so. I think efficiencies like this, we haven't seen efficiencies like this probably since the last industrial revolution, right? And I would say this is even more so because it has the potential to automate so much
mm.
out of our day-to-day lives. I could be wrong. Maybe I'm just too much of an optimist,
Yeah.
but
In some ways, it's already happening. If you look at some of the like automated assistants, so things like Siri and like that, the one that Amazon has or the one that Google has, is you're actually that's your agent that you're using to act on your behalf, but it is interacting with someone else, isn't it? And they could have an agent on that on their side. It's I think the interesting piece is will they all speak in English, or it might be or a human language, I should say, rather than English. Will it be easier just to do it in some sort of API kind of connection that we don't understand? And it's the dangers for us around that. I don't know.
yeah, there's so much to dive into there.
Getting
First of all,
sci-fi here.
on the language side, that's not so sci-fi. We actually, there's a point solution today that can translate. So you're talking in French, I'm talking in English. I
Mm.
will hear you in English and you will hear me in French. And that's real. That's live. And it's the delay is becoming to the point where it doesn't even feel like much of a delay.
Mm.
That piece, I think the interesting part is what you said at the end, which is will they be talking in ones and zeros or will they be talking
Yeah.
in human language? Are we going to be able to understand them and what they're doing on the back end? And I think that's part of the guardrails. And the one thing we haven't even talked about is what from the political side is going to happen? What are they going to allow with the data privacy regulations and the way we're heading towards that? It almost like the two of them sooner or later are going to clash.
I mean,
Data
we just had the EU AI Act has just gone through over in Europe. I know the president there, they're putting some guardrails around the size of the models you could put in, but the speed of development of this stuff, I think it's so Anthropic just launched their latest AI this week, which is like which sort of trumps ChatGPT 4, and it's just accelerating. I mean, it's almost politically we can't keep up to control what's going on, and whether we should or not, I don't know. And if you're optimistic, maybe you think we shouldn't, but I'm plenty of people nervous about it.
So yeah, the optimist in me says that because we're still the ones writing the code and training the models, and that I have trust in the humans that will keep this under control. I
Mm,
think we'll get there. But from a political side, we've always been so far behind technology
mm.
that it takes time for regulations to catch up to the tech. But I agree, we're moving too fast. The train's left the station. There's no putting the genie back in the bottle in this case. So yeah.
For me, I think it's the feedback loops and the fact that they almost like it feels like it's feeding on itself. And so the fact you build a new capability and then you use that capability to then improve that capability, and you do that, and so that's where you get this almost like a exponential kind of acceleration that's going on. And it feels like we'll see that in the large language model space. And and I think Nvidia have just launched a new chip that's gone out, and so it's really going fast. And you just wonder how quickly it's going to get to what we think of what we do versus and in terms of like how we actually process information and predict it, it's getting very close. I think it might actually be very close to the way the brain works in some ways. And you talked a bit about point solutions then,
Yeah.
software point solutions, which is really seems like that's what people are adopting. When you have a lot of different sort of point solutions or just a lot of different software vendors, how do they best coordinate that they're all working together, they're all working in harmony? Because that can be a bit of a challenge sometimes where you have they don't talk to each other or they're doing things in isolation, or even in terms of like pricing as well, where you're getting the best deal for almost like that bundle of things working together.
Yeah. So if you're talking modern solution to modern solution, meaning it's something that is been built in the cloud, native to the cloud, right? The APIs are pretty much, and any decent development team can
Mm,
integrate solutions, right? Whether they need to be fully integrated or not is a different conversation. When it comes to like training AI models, you really need the data side, and then the rest is pretty easy type of integrations we've been doing for years, right? Costing side is an interesting challenge because this is the all-in-one versus best-in-breed buying, right?
mm,
And the conversations of I've seen some people calculate they're spending $1,500 to $1,600 just in software licenses per agent on average
mm,
per month, right? But you're talking like CCAT, WFM, QA analytics, bot technology, agent assist, knowledge base. You start adding up all these things, you get this huge license cost. Um, But if it returns the investment back into efficiencies, customer experience, and all the right things, then you can justify the spend. Because obviously it doesn't take many improvements in efficiencies and reduction in agent actual cost, full-blown agent cost to justify that cost.
Do you think there'll be consolidation in the industry and the software industry to try and create to bundle more of those within sort of almost like walled ecosystems for, particularly if we're looking at the economy as an example, and budgets are getting squeezed, people are looking around where they can do it. It just seems like maybe this partnership model might start to develop more often.
Yeah, we've seen it here, right? We've seen it up to this point. You look at the number of companies that, let's talk about the big three here, Genesis, Five9, and NICE, right? The acquisitions have been constant, and the delivery of the all-in-one solution is definitely something that is the problem I think we run into is there's so many point solutions inside the contact center that everybody knows you can't be great at everything. And oftentimes when you're a CCaaS, you're great at building that solution, which is already enormous and has a ton of functionality. You remember back in the day, ACD and dialer and everything was separate, right? You combine all those and then you start throwing in all these alternate tools. People start to realize that the best in breed, they really want to create efficiencies and get the best technology that's out there. They're probably not going to be in an all-in-one process. What I would love to see, and I've talked to a few of the bigger vendors, I would love to see a company just recognize that contact centers don't buy everything all at once, right? We buy stuff in this industry to solve a problem, an individual problem, and we tend to do it kind of piece by piece. If one of the vendors would actually recognize that people want to buy what they want to buy when they want to buy it and allow them to do that, I think that vendor could potentially win a lot of business keeping those products separate and be a catalog and use the whatever point of entry a company wants and allow them to win that client, support them, provide excellent service. And then the next time their next solution comes up, it's logical that they're going to consider that company, but no one's done it. Everybody buys somebody, engulfs it into their platform, and then says, sorry, you need to buy the whole platform. And it just, I think our industry although we do a lot of great cutting edge technology on the points around, I don't think we do a good job no one's really owned the market share when it comes to contact center technology. And maybe it's too hard. Who knows? I'm just throwing stuff out there. But I think if somebody really did partner, like you said, and buy all the right solutions, allow people to bundle them if they want, buy point solutions when they need them, I think that's the winning formula, and no one's successfully done it.
So that's a bit like the ecosystem kind of model, a bit like the App Store or Google Play Store, which is I want something extra, I press a button and it just integrates automatically because it's part of the same kind of suite to a certain extent, but maybe you get some sort of bundle price and you can add or take away features, which we in software a lot.
You see it in Salesforce, right? And everybody tries to model Salesforce, but they don't really deliver, and they don't hold themselves accountable for all the other pieces. I don't know that the App Store, it's how we're comfortable buying today. So I get it. I don't know. I just think there's a better way to do it, just in my opinion. I can't help it. When you come from like hardware-based platforms in the days, it was all about provide a great platform, but especially provide a great service. And I think a lot of companies, they went too far to the other side where they're like, we just want to build software, let other people service it. And I just don't like that philosophy. But anyways.
Yeah. And what about the economy? So we were talking just a little bit earlier around sort of elections around the world. There's a lot of elections around the world. The economy seems to really, I suppose, coming out of the pandemic, been struggling. I think just generally, it feels like cost of living seems like that's an issue everywhere. Certainly interest rates seems like it's an issue everywhere. What's the outlook there for the economy and like how you see it? And what does that mean for consumers who might be struggling, but then also for businesses who might then also be looking at costs as well?
Yeah. It's such an interesting time from a macroeconomic perspective. Obviously, this year's election is one thing, but just pure economics, the inflation is higher for longer. It looks like it's gonna stay there for a while. We didn't really beat inflation based upon the last two reports. We'll see with the third one. If the third one shows higher interest or higher inflation again, we're showing a trend, things could get really ugly. But the job market over here is unemployment is still at one of the lowest numbers it's been. It's such a weird time.
Good,
I
isn't it?
think
Yeah.
that's the confusing part for a lot of enterprises and the consumers. You read the news and it's like, greatest economy ever, and then you go into the grocery store and you're 2 to 3 times the bill that you used to pay for the same things,
Mm,
which is exaggerating a little, right? I think it's something like 30% or something,
mm,
but nonetheless, yeah. I think there's more fear and uncertainty right now in the macroeconomic side that is delaying some buying decisions or forcing some buying decisions that are promised to provide better savings. It's such an interesting time. You look at Main Street and you talk to the normal person here in the States, and things aren't good. You
mm,
look at Wall Street and we're at all-time highs.
mm.
It's a weird time.
The employment market's interesting, isn't it? With low unemployment, high inflation, and low unemployment, and I think that probably also then speaks to then how does that then go back to digital adoption as well? Because if you can't hire the people, then do you need technology to take some of that load at a very minimum to a certain extent?
Yeah. Yeah, of course you do. It's nobody has any good answers, right? I think there's a general mistrust right now in the numbers that are provided, if people even look at it. Most people just go about their day. They look at when gas is high, they're like,
Mm, yeah.
gas is high. It's expensive to drive my car. When groceries are high, it's expensive to live. When rent's high, it's those kind of things that they see, most people in the States see on a daily basis. I tend to spend probably more time. I'm probably in a much higher percentile for the amount of time that I focus on macroeconomics, but I think it's so important. I don't have any good answers about that. What I do know is that it is clearly the uncertainty is impacting buying decisions, both directions, right? To buy or to not buy. And that's not going to shift anytime soon. I expect to have to get through the election, get through this year, get on to whoever wins, and 2025, we'll start to get some more clarity to what is actually going on.
And how do you think firms should prepare for that? So there's a lot of uncertainty, but also, I mean, one of the things we did learn through the pandemic was we probably weren't prepared enough. And if we had some of these things beforehand, then we could have been better prepared, right? I mean, what are some of the things you think firms need to be looking at now to just to get ready, however it comes out but it is uncertain, but prepare with the uncertainty in mind.
Redundancy in everywhere you possibly can. Obviously, ensuring that one, your data is safe, secure, and
Mm,
available for training. Whether you've got AI in your plan for this year or next year or the year after, sooner or later you're going to need that data accessible. You're going to need it. Um, you're going to need to standardize your model, store it in a somewhere, and start cleaning it up, start preparing it. You need the right infrastructure and your people. Yeah, in the end, I started as an agent. I grew into leadership. I ran centers before I got into the software side. So from that perspective, I mean, it's still people, processes, technology, right?
mm.
So make sure that you've got your people in place that can adopt change, look to the future, and then your processes in place to make sure you can continue to scale and the technology to do. Yeah, I mean, there's no good answers, but the one thing I'm sure of is if you're not down the path of digital transformation and data cleanup and normalization, um, you're behind.
You don't want to be searching through spreadsheets or searching through reports trying to find the data after it's happened, right? You want to be having it beforehand as much as you can. I think
Yeah,
I'd
yeah. Go
concur on
back
that.
go back to your IT team, and if you see them using CSV files, you got some work to do.
Flipping through dot matrix printing printouts, yeah, that's what I used to do. But you think about how far we've come.
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
Next thing we know, we're putting the rotary dial phones back on agents' desks. Stop it.
yeah,
That's
yeah,
yeah, yeah. We do what we can, right? The contact center has always been a KPI driven organization long before anybody else really was, in my opinion. And I think if you know your data, your numbers, you understand your business, and you can tie it back to your core values of your business, and then
mm,
move it forward. I just don't. What makes me nervous is that when I see companies who used to say customer experience was the only thing that mattered,
mm.
to now not even mentioning it in their earnings calls or in their reports, or CEOs aren't talking about it as much as they were for even 3 years pre-pandemic. Hopefully we don't lose sight of that.
Yeah, these are quite interesting, subtle signs, I think, around potentially financial stress as well. So if you're talking about the financials more, but actually the customer experience piece maybe came from when it was a little bit slightly richer time in terms of profit margins, but actually it's really important because you're going to get it back if you treat the customers better.
Yeah, the numbers don't lie, right? Every
Mm,
report you read about the impact of customer experience and employee experience, it shows that the performance of the company is significantly more. I did a talk on that not too long. No, it's been longer. It's been a couple of years. But doing the research for it, it was big numbers. We were
mm,
looking at 20, 30% outperformance of companies that focused on employee experience and customer experience as far as financial performance, right? So the
mm,
numbers don't lie. It's just, I think it's hard, like you said, during rougher financial times or uncertainty, it's really hard to convince a board that no, the experience is what
mm.
matters and we need to spend on this, because they've also not done a good job. And we as an industry have not done a good job of tying the financials back
Mm.
to the results, back to the customer
Mm.
experience.
So you can
So
get caught, you can get really caught short if you don't if you don't invest in future capability and you're just like looking at things very short term. Yeah. Fred, where do you think we go over the next sort of 12, 18 months? I know you're talking about the optimism around it. We talk quite a lot around AI, large language models, digital transformation, but what are your predictions if I get you to get your crystal ball out again?
You keep making me pull it out. The good news is I actually like to talk about predictions, and I'm willing to stick my neck out there because sometimes I'm wrong, sometimes I'm right. I'm often too fast on my predictions, but they sooner or later come true. So, asking me over the next 12 to 18, digital transformation, CCaaS is going to continue to accelerate. A lot of shift from cloud to cloud, and a lot of, I would say, not half baked, but half smaller project implementations that'll lead to much bigger on the AI side.
Mm,
The agent assistant stuff, people, it's a no-brainer. That'll
mm,
continue to move. The analytics stuff, voice analytics, digital analytics, QA, QM, automation, that stuff's proven. Those point solutions that really do solve and provide an easy ROI, those will continue to move. We won't see the big impact, I think, until the voice and digital bot technology really accelerates adoption. That requires all the rest of the cleanup, like we talked about.
mm,
It requires some work. And there'll be plenty of people who will try to bring that technology out before they do the back end work, right? And
mm.
they'll have challenges, but 12 to 18 months is just not that long. It
Yeah,
used to be forever when we were kids, right? 12 to
yeah.
18 months was like forever. We're old. We turned a year older, but now it's like 12 to 18 months is nothing. But I think there will be a lot of advancements.
I,
I,
And it's also quite interesting, I suppose, just going back to the age of the .com, I suppose, just the time between when we're talking about it, when you actually get to see it, right? And that's some of that base work going on. Although I do think that timing is getting shorter, it feels like.
Absolutely. I mean, the training models, ever since Google put out that memo or their release of the concept of the transformers from 17, 18, when that came out, I don't remember exact dates, but it's just accelerated. And
Mm,
then in November of 22, ChatGPT launch, they didn't expect to see what they
mm,
did. And as soon as that came, the acceleration is just it's crazy. Every one of us wishes back in 2022 we invested in Nvidia, but the training and tuning and the advancement of the models, the integration of the technology agent, right, versus that, it's, yeah, I've never seen anything like it, but I think that's true about every industrial revolution. I
mm.
just think that this one is accelerating at a pace so fast that um, we definitely can't, we don't have the time we did like in the manufacturing revolution. We had years, decades actually, to train the people and move them into alternate career paths and stuff like this. So this change is coming too fast. That's one of the things in the back of my head that I worry about is when you take people's jobs and their purpose, we humans, we need a purpose. Otherwise things get lorded. What is it? I lost the book.
Lord of the Flies.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, yeah,
Lord
yeah.
of the Flies. When you lose a purpose, humans don't behave well. Yeah, so hopefully we can solve and take that seriously. And the idea of a universal basic income has been thrown around a lot. Although you
Mm,
don't hear much talk about it right now, and
Yeah, it's stopped a bit recently, more recently, hasn't it?
that makes me wonder. I'm curious about why all of a sudden no one's paying attention to the idea of the acceleration of these tools and the future of human work and life, right? I think it's an important conversation that we need to keep having. So, anyways,
Now, you do wonder if we were going to take a bit of a step back and a bit of a pause just for the humans to catch up to a certain extent, or but technology-wise, it's a very exciting time to be watching it, at least anyway. But will it be interesting to see how that that sort of pans out going forward, really?
yeah, absolutely.
Fred, thanks very much for making the time. I know we talked about a lot there, so but I really appreciate making the time. It's great to get your insight.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you having me.